That night, many thoughts ran through the mind of Timothy. He wondered why he was able to see Christabel. He had seen a ghost when he was a child. When he told his parents, they took him to where he was cleansed so he wouldn't have to have contact with ghosts anymore. But he was surprised he could still see one after so many years. Now there is a mission for him. He was going to the house of a billionaire as a cook. He wondered how he was going to cope. He wondered if he was not putting his life in danger. A lot was still going through his mind when the merry hands of sleep took him off. After Christabel left Timothy's presence, she had her mother in her heart. She looked for her and found her lying on the floor outside in the cold. No one was willing to take her in. All the people she had helped turned their backs on her now that she needed them the more. Her mother was shivering in tears. She was sure her mother had not eaten anything, but there was nothing she could do. She couldn't even console her mother who was going through so much. Christabel sat beside her mother in the dark night, hoping for a helper to come along and rescue her mother. An old woman passed by and took pity on Felicia, who was lying on the floor. She asked Felicia why she was lying down outside with a bag. Felicia told her that the universe was against her. She told Felicia that all would be well. She also told her that she had a free space in her house where she could pass the night. Felicia really wanted death to take her away, but the words of the old woman was so calming and reassuring. She didn't know who she was, and she had lent her a helping hand. She followed the old woman back to her little house. Christabel was so happy. Finally, someone was willing to give her mother a roof over her head. Now she could concentrate and quickly solve the puzzle and come back to the world for her mother's sake. She wiped her tears, then she disappeared. The next morning, Timothy got ready and dressed up. He waited for Christabel to give him directions. Christabel appeared and gave directions to her father's mansion. The mansion was quite far from where Timothy lived. On his way to the mansion, Timothy was scared of what was going to happen inside the mansion. He didn't know if he was going to be employed or if he was endangering his life for a stranger's ghost. When he arrived, he knocked on the gate. The gateman opened the gate and asked Timothy why he had come. Timothy told him he was looking for the job of a cook, which was vacant. The gateman didn't ask how he knew. He opened the gate and let him inside. When the lady who had claimed her son belonged to Christabel's father came out, she saw Timothy. Timothy was looking so charming. His smile radiated. His hair was well combed with neat beards. She fell for his charms immediately. "Good morning, ma. I heard there is a vacancy here for the job of a cook, and I'm here to apply," Timothy said politely. "What is your name, fine boy?" she asked as she kept admiring Timothy. "My name is Timothy, ma," he answered with his charming smiles which swept Miriam off her feet. "You are employed already, my dear. You can start today. You are starting now," Miriam answered. She knew her contract was expiring in 3 days' time after the burial of Christabel. All she had to do was to satisfy her sexual urge with Timothy and walk away, leaving him at the mansion when she was paid the money that was agreed. "Thank you so much, ma. I'm grateful," Timothy replied with a calm and polite voice. "I'm very famished and I can't wait to eat from your pots, my dear," Miriam said, smiling mischievously at Timothy. Timothy was happy that he was employed immediately, but when he saw the way Miriam was looking at him, he didn't want to go to bed with her. He kept the application letter he had come with on the table and followed the maid who was to show him the kitchen. The maid showed him everything he needed to use for cooking and then left him alone. When she left, Timothy started calling on to Christabel using whispers. It felt like she was not going to come, but finally she appeared. Her face was so sad. Timothy asked her what happened again. Christabel told Timothy about what her mother was going through and why she needed to get answers fast before it was too late. Timothy asked Christabel to show him how to cook with everything that was available in the kitchen. The maid walked in and noticed that Timothy was talking to somebody, but Timothy pretended that he was talking to himself, and then she left. After cooking, Timothy asked Miriam where he was going to serve her. Miriam asked to be served inside her room. Timothy knew what she was after, so he decided to use it to his advantage since Christabel had a little time left. When Timothy came in with the food, Miriam was lying down on the bed, pressing her phone. She was dressed seductively. Timothy's eye caught her phone, and he thought to himself that that would be where all the information he was looking for would be. He served her the food on a little side stool inside the room. Miriam came closer to taste the food, but Timothy told her not to. Go and take your bath, ma. The food will taste more delicious after you come out of the shower. Miriam was thinking Timothy also wanted what she wanted. She was already feeling so hot down there, so she went into the shower without any hesitation. Timothy went to where she had kept her phone immediately. Luckily, it wasn't locked. He went into her WhatsApp and saw all the discussions she had with Christabel's uncles. He even saw the amount they had proposed to pay her. Timothy took pictures of their chats. Then he kept her phone back perfectly where she had left it. When Miriam came back into the room, just tying a towel, she was surprised to see that Timothy had left the room. She looked around and her eyes met with her phone. She quickly picked it up, but nothing was missing. Miriam wore her clothes. She lost appetite to eat the food that Timothy had served her. She walked to the sitting room and asked the maid to call the cook who she had just employed. She wondered why Timothy had left after promising to wait for her inside the room so no one would know what was happening. The maid told her that Timothy left the house in a haste. When she asked him where he was going to, he said he needed to get something quickly from the market. Miriam wondered what had gotten over her. She had employed someone who just came with an application letter without verifying who he really was. Worst still, she wanted to take him to bed. She wondered who Timothy was and why he had come for employment looking so cute. She looked at her phone again to see if money was stolen from her, but it didn't look like someone touched it. She picked up the application letter and opened it, but nothing was written inside. Miriam sat back on the chair hoping for Timothy to come back. After Timothy left, he went back to his apartment. He was so happy that he had gotten evidence proving that Miriam was just a con woman who was hired by Christabel's uncles to reap away her father's wealth. He called for Christabel. He was so happy to tell her that he had found evidence. Christabel appeared, but she was crying bitterly. Timothy asked Christabel what was happening and why she was crying again, but Christabel didn't answer his questions. She asked him why he left the mansion already. Timothy told her that there was good news. He told her he had taken pictures of conversations Miriam had with her uncles, and he showed her those pictures. Christabel loved the fact that she had some evidence she could use against her uncles, but she was not yet satisfied because she had not found out how they killed her or even who killed her father. That was the only way she would come back to life. But time was closing in on her and she had just one day left. Christabel remembered the scene she had seen when she went to her best friend's house. She told Timothy about what her best friend did to her. Timothy told Christabel that it was better she focused on things that were more important than her friend who just betrayed her trust. But Christabel was very curious to know what really happened. Back at the house of the old woman who had taken Felicia, she asked Felicia what had happened and why she was homeless. Felicia explained that her husband and only child were dead, leaving her all alone. Her husband's brothers sent her out of her husband's house. The old woman asked her why she left her husband's house without a fight. Felicia said that a woman walked in with a child, claiming that her husband was the one who fathered the boy. She was already heartbroken, losing her only daughter. It was of no use dragging properties of a man who had cheated on her to the extent of having a child outside. The old woman asked Felicia if she really believed that it was her husband who had fathered the child.
All I want is my daughter to come back to my arms. How could she leave me? How could she die? She knew that she was all I have. If I can have my daughter, all the properties can go. It can all go. I don't want any other thing.
Felicia said with tears streaming down her cheeks all over again. She was going through so much pain. The old woman who was staying with her grandchild asked her granddaughter to prepare something for Felicia to eat. At Timothy's house, Christabel looked at Timothy with tears in her eyes.
Please help me. Help me communicate with Angela. I want to know what I've done to her. I want to know what I did to offend our friendship, she said. Timothy felt so sorry for her. He knew exactly how it felt when a friend stabs you at the back. He told Christabel that he would leave to go and see Angela if she gave him directions. Christabel gave him the directions and then disappeared. Christabel appeared in Angela's house. Angela was seated on the couch watching television. Christabel stood beside her and was crying deeply. Someone who she called her sister was living her best life while her body was still in the mortuary. She wondered if Angela really didn't know that she was already dead. It took a while, then a knock came on Angela's door. She wondered who must have come to visit her because she wasn't expecting any visitors that day. She went to get the door. When she opened the door, she saw Timothy. "How can I help you?" Angela asked the stranger in front of her door. "My name is Timothy, and I've come with a message from your dead friend, Christabel," Timothy said. Angela's heart sank into her stomach and came back again. Her heart started pounding, and goosebumps appeared on her skin in fear. From Angela's reaction, it was clear that she was aware of Christabel's death. Christabel couldn't control the tears that rained down her own cheeks. "What did you say?" Angela asked with a soft tone, trying to know if her ears were deceiving her. "Your best friend who is dead sent a message for you," Timothy said again. Angela lost words and just stood there looking at Timothy with her heartbeat racing faster. "Your friend's soul is in deep pain. She's asking to know what she has done to offend you," Timothy said to Angela. Angela could feel tears building in her eyes. She didn't wait to answer Timothy's questions. She ran inside and banged the door. She stood at the door and started crying as tears ran down her cheeks uncontrollably. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Christy. I let lust get the best part of me. I'm so sorry, Christy. I never meant for any of this to happen. I was caught. I didn't know. I don't know if you can hear me. So I will explain it all to you. It began when you introduced your fiancé to me. He was my ex many years ago and we got separated. I couldn't tell you about him because I didn't want to be a barrier to your relationship. But he started coming back for me behind your back. I told him to stay away from me. I didn't want to tell you about it so you wouldn't think I was your enemy. Christy, he never stopped coming. And I fell into his tempting arms. He brought back past memories and I couldn't help it anymore. Something happened one day. During that time, I came to spend a weekend at your place. Everyone left the house, leaving me alone at home with the mates. One of your uncles came to visit. He met the house empty. He decided to wait for you to come back. As he waited, a call came into his phone. He left the house. I thought he had left, so I wanted to go and pick something from the backyard. As I went towards the back of the house, I overheard your uncle discussing with someone over the phone. They were talking about a plan to take over your father's wealth. I was so shocked, and I made a noise which attracted your uncle. He hung up on the call and he caught me. He asked me what I heard and I said nothing. Your uncle threatened me. I never knew he had seen me with Fred before, and I didn't know how he found out. He told me I had to close my mouth, if not he was going to expose me. He also told me that when you and your father get out of the way, I could have Fred to myself. Even though it hurt me a lot, my hands were tied. I wished so many times to tell you, but I just couldn't. Christy, please forgive me. Forgive me.
Angela said with tears streaming down her cheeks. Christabel, who had just been listening to all that Angela was saying, couldn't control her own tears either. The pain was unbearable for her and she disappeared from the scene. She got to a lonely place and she called out for the one in white. She wanted to go back for the sake of her mother. Everyone else had betrayed her, but the one in white didn't answer. You need to find out who killed you and your father, the voice said from the void. The clock is ticking. Christabel couldn't understand what else was left for her to discover. She had already seen that her uncles were the one who had planned it all. She had found out that her fiancé was sleeping with her best friend. She had also seen that her best friend was aware of all the plans but couldn't tell her. She wondered who must have killed her and her father. She wondered who did it. Christabel sat down, buried in thoughts. She tried to replay the scene that the one in white had showed her. Someone had walked into her father's room, but the person's face was covered. She started trying to recall all those who were in the mansion on the day that her father died. The driver always slept in his own house, but he usually comes into the building at night. She tried so hard to see the face in the darkness, but she couldn't. She noticed that the person in the darkness was a female figure. They had 2 maids who lived with them. She wondered how any of the maids would benefit from the death of her father. She still couldn't place her hand on anything. Her father didn't pay them less, and they were never overstressed. Christabel wished she had enough time. She would have gone to the maids one after the other, just like she did with Angela. But her time was short and she had little time on her hand to find out all. She sat there and cried. Then something occurred to Christabel. She remembered what Angela had said. Her uncle had caught Angela eavesdropping on him. Not only did he catch her, he also knew that she was going out with her fiancé. Who then would be the best to execute the plan perfectly? It wouldn't be any of the maids. It would be her best friend Angela. Christabel tried not to believe what her mind was telling her. She shook her head and tears started running down her cheeks. Angela had actually come to their house for the weekend as usual, the day her father slept and never woke up. Angela slept with her on the same bed and she never realized it. Then the scene replayed again. This time it was clear. Angela stood up from the bed in her room and went towards her father's room. Her father's room wasn't locked and she walked in. Angela picked up a pillow and suffocated her father to death.
Why? Why me? Why me? Why all this betrayal? Why all this betrayal from my best friend, from my uncle, from my fiancé?
Christabel said out loud with tears. It was a painful experience for anyone to go through. She just wished she never realized any of what was going on behind her back. Her best friend killed her father inside their house and she didn't even realize it. She begged the one in white to send her back already because she had gotten everything she needed to know. You still have to find the person who killed you. That is the one task that is left. Remember, your time is ticking, the voice said again. What else do I need to know? My uncles did it. They must have paid someone to do the job for them. Please just send me back. Once they all go to prison, no one will bring hurt to me or my mother anymore, Christabel said with tears rolling down her cheeks. But no answer came. She couldn't help but feel alone and she sobbed bitterly. The next day, Christabel discovered that it was her burial day. Her uncles didn't want her to stay long in the morgue. They wanted everything over quickly so they could have all of her father's properties to themselves. She saw a coffin with her body inside. They were gathered in the compound of her father's house. They were not doing any burial rites for her, just a few minutes of silence before she would be taken to the public cemetery to be buried. Only a few people gathered to witness the burial. As Christabel watched what was happening in confusion, her mother ran into the scene crying.
She wondered how her mother knew that the date was shifted. Christabel called out for the one on white to come to her aid. She had no more time left. Her mother was sobbing bitterly on the floor and no one was consoling her. They all watched her cry her eyes out. Felicia was heartbroken. Her daughter wasn't even getting a befitting burial. She was going to be buried in the public cemetery when her father had houses. The more Felicia cried, the more Christabel cried too. "Let your instincts guide you. You are running out of time," the voice from the void said. Christabel wiped her tears immediately and began to look around. Then there was a flash. She had seen the face of the one who knocked her down briefly. The face had actually looked familiar. The more she thought about it, she wiped her tears and tried to remember clearly. Then she saw the face clearly. It was her fiancé Fred who had knocked her down. Why? Christabel said as she sat down sobbing like a child beside her mother. She appeared immediately inside the void with the one on white standing beside her. "Now, you have solved it all. Just like your best friend, your fiancé was also blackmailed and promised a lot of money to kill you. Your uncles planned it perfectly so their hands would seem clean. Now that you know, I'll send you back to the world. Bring them all to justice and choose well who would be by your side. Apply wisdom and take back your father's company. It hasn't been sold. They can't sell it off without a signature of your father's offspring. This is because your father had been a good man while he was on earth, and we cannot let his death go unpunished," the one in white said and snapped his fingers. Christabel sneezed, to the surprise of everyone present, including all her uncles. They were all shocked she came back to life. Christabel came down from the coffin with the help of her mother. She hugged her daughter and tears of joy streamed down her cheeks. Christabel didn't speak to anyone. She just went back into their house with her mother. Her uncles and everyone who came to witness her burial left the house in confusion, except the lady who had come with her little son. Christabel told her mother about everything that had happened. Her mother was so heartbroken, and she only thanked God for giving her daughter a second chance to live again. With all the evidence that Christabel had gotten, she sent all her uncles and Miriam to prison. She also sent her best friend to prison for murder and her fiancé for attempted murder. Felicia went back to the old woman's house to thank her. It was the old woman who had actually told her that the burial date was changed and that Christabel was about to be buried without her notice. But when she got there with Christabel, the old woman was nowhere to be found, and the house didn't exist. Christabel knew that it was the one in white who must have come in form of an old woman to keep her mother safe. After a few months, Christabel got married to Timothy after recovering all that her father left behind for her.